Welcome to Just a Cup on Believe, an organic conversation with the world's greatest athletes and the coaches who coach them, just as if we were sitting in a coffee shop having a nice cup of joe. Today, I've got an amazing pleasure to have with me an Olympic gold medalist, multiple medals, world records, David Blair. I'm excited to have you on the show. I think our guests and our listeners are going to really have a fun time hearing your story. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So David is a Paralympic athlete, and I think there's a lot of confusion when somebody mentions Paralympic athlete and they sit and see you just on the screen. They might get confused because I don't think there's a very good explanation of what Paralympics entails for the general public. Can you just kind of like give us a little bit of background of kind of what that is and kind of the behind the scenes look at it?
Yeah. So to be honest, it's when I first was introduced to it, I really kind of had the conception or the perception, I should say, that it was for athletes that were in wheelchairs.
Right.
And it's not. that is an aspect of them, but there's so many other aspects that it's easy to get lost in it. A few places have nailed it down though, like in the UK. It's a huge sport. It's very well received. They understand it. They understand the impairments and what they mean and who's where, and it's awesome stuff. But one thing that's pretty cool is they classify it in ways that they think would be fair competition, right?
Okay.
So if someone has a single leg below the knee impairment, they're going to have them compete with other single leg below the knee impairments, right? And someone that's above the knee impairment on a single leg, they won't have them compete against them because probably it's not always the case. We have a female athlete on the ski team that proved this, that she has an above the knee impairment on a single leg and beat the below the knee impairment in her event, right? But
wow,
typically they try and make it as fair as possible with the impairments given for the competitors to be on a level playing field and then say, okay, let's see who can win out of you guys. Let's see who can come out the best or the champion in it. So,
and I think that most individuals wouldn't realize, that you state champion in high school.
Yeah.
No Paralympic side of things, just state champ. You compete at the collegiate level for Weber State, which is a Division I school. So you have that, but then you kind of went away from the sport for a while. And it took you 16 years to kind of come back to it, which, you can do some quick math. You're not 25. No. So how did that all come about that you were a collegiate athlete, Division I athlete, and then kind of went away and then came back? What was the motivation? What was kind of the metamorphosis of how that happened?
Yeah. So I to go back, like really it's just starting with Little League baseball, right? Like I never, to me, it's just my leg, right? And it's just what I was born with. I remember, here's a funny story. I was going to the bus one time, and as a kid in middle school age, and we were late. I was late a lot to the bus. I missed it a lot. My dad, even one time, my dad tried to have me walk to school in the snow, hoping that would make me not miss the bus. I missed it still after that.
That's great.
So I was sprinting to the bus and I hit my foot wrong, and it made it hurt. And my left foot, which is my impaired foot, it hurts. It has arthritis in it. It's had it in there for years. I've always limped. It's not just because it's fused and it can't move. There's inflammation in there and it hurts to walk on it.
Okay.
But yeah, I smashed my foot doing something, sprinting to the bus, and I went to the school and I talked to the school nurse and I said, yeah, I hurt my little foot. And they're like, "Oh, you hurt your little foot, huh?" I'm like, "Oh, I have 2 different size feet, and the little one is the one I hurt." So to me, it's just like who I am, right? I have
Right, right.
I have a little foot, and I have a little leg, and I have a big leg, and my big leg is giant, and I've never been able to get pants because my big leg doesn't fit in them, and my little leg flaps like a sail in my.
Right.
But yeah, I did well in junior high. I did well in baseball growing up and
Okay.
little league ball. So
Was that kind of the first love, baseball?
yeah, that was my first introduction to sport. Like, you work with athletes. There's people who participate in the sport, and then there's freaking athletes that
Sure.
you're like,
100%.
oh my gosh, you could go really far in this, and you like, they don't have to practice to get at the level that these other kids are, right? Like,
Sure.
they're gifted and talented athletes. And that was kind of my first introduction to, like, maybe I was blessed when I was born with some talents that aren't typical. And that was where it kind of came out, as in baseball. Even in just little league, I could hit home runs and I could throw from the outfield to the home plate. Like, just
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to deserve it. I didn't do anything to be gifted that. It was just a gift that came with my genetics when I was born, and it's not there in any of my other family members either. But
and that's actually pretty normal. I mean, there's not very many families that have a number of athletes in them that exceed the normal.
Yeah, it might be a good indicator that they're cheating somewhere, right?
Right.
So yeah, I took to it well. I wanted to do baseball, but my coach, the local high school coach at the time, said, you're going to be able to stand out a lot better if you need to get a scholarship, which I did. There was no way I was going to go to college with my own funding or with family funding, right? I'm really proud that I come from a really just hardcore blue collar family.
That's awesome.
Just like raindrops on the window was entertainment. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, we didn't have a lot growing up, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
Because you grew up in Utah.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, grew up in Utah, and my first love was baseball, but I started doing well in track in junior high and middle school age, and I ended up doing better and better and winning a state championship, which got me the scholarship in discus. And all along, like, my goal was to just get myself into college through my athletic performance. And I was able to do that. I went to college. I was lucky enough to break some records at Weber. I still have one school record there in the hammer throw. And that was my reason for using it, right? I had always this thing in the back of my mind, like, hey, maybe I could go to the Olympic trials. And everyone who does anything in sports has aspirations to, like, compete at the highest level, and that was one of mine too. But
absolutely,
I still remember the pain in my foot that I had on my last competition in college, and I was just relieved to be done. I did well at the meet. I won the conference championship in the hammer, and I got second in the discus. So I scored 18 points for the team. But I still remember just thinking, my gosh, I'm so glad I can be done with this now, because this is just killing my foot. And that was it. Like, it was an end to a means for me. I wanted to go to college, and go to college, I needed a scholarship. And to get a scholarship, I thought maybe I could pull it off with track. And it just happened to work out. It was.
And then you kind of transition and you become in the software industry, you know? And so, I mean, like, that is very, mentally draining. Knowing some folks in that, I mean, you're constantly using your brain because you're using your hands, and there's not a ton of physical, kind of stress is put on you, but it's a ton of mental stress.
You're right.
And then after you go off of that, and then you go into, you come back into the sport. Was there a moment, or was there something that somebody say something to you that was like, hey, you need to get back into the competing part of things?
Yeah, well, as a track fan, like, every time spring comes, especially in the mountains when the snow melts, like, you're just like, oh, it's time to get back on the track. It's time to get in the ring. that never went away for me ever. Like every spring meant it's time for track season.
I love it.
But to be honest, I was watching the 2012 Olympics and I saw Oscar Pistorius running on the track.
Yeah.
And it triggered something in my head, like saying, wait, he's not in a wheelchair. What's he doing on the Paralympics?
Right.
And I was like, man, I should look into that and see if I would be eligible to do this. Right. And then that thought just faded, and then it popped back in my head in 2015. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, maybe they have hammer. It's my favorite event. And they don't have hammer. And I'm like, so that made me delay it a little. And I was like, well, maybe, because throwing the disc hurts my foot. It just hurts it bad.
Interesting.
That leaving the back of the ring with that.
Yeah.
That's the foot that I would drive with. And it hurts. So I was like, maybe I can. I looked into it and found out they do the discus, and that there'd been this party happening with people that I should have been part of, and I didn't know it, right? And people claiming to be, hitting a landmark or hitting records and distances that had never been hit before by Paralympic athletes, but I'd been hitting them, 20 years before that.
Right.
So I was like, hey man, you guys are having a party and like, I'd like to participate.
I love it.
So that's kind of how it evolved for me.
And I mean, and obviously in Rio de Janeiro in 2016, you get the gold medal in the discus, which is pretty awesome. And, you follow that up at the World Championships just last year in Paris with another gold medal.
Yeah.
So explain how the whole, because you're the Olympics, and right after the Olympics finishes in the same city, the Paralympic Games start, correct?
That's right.
So is there a little bit of an overlap between the two, or is it completely separated?
It's all the same venues, we stay in the same Olympic Village. It's part of hosting the Olympics as you host the Paralympics as well. And I think it's spaced out close enough. There's not an overlap, but like the Team USA staff, they stay in the Olympic Village for like that 1 or 2 week period where no one's there,
right?
And get everything ready for the Paralympics to come in. And then we come in, and then once the Paralympic Games are over, the city that hosts the Olympics is done. Like that's part of the deal. And so the Paralympics happens right after. There's no overlap, but there is a lot of overlap with the athletes at Team USA events, and with venues. Like we'll train at the Olympic Training Center, just like the Olympic athletes that are there. We train, most of us, in the same exact way that any Olympian would be training. We do all the same stuff. It's just we're impaired in some way, and
right.
Then we compete in that. So that's.
Was there a favorite memory from Rio? I mean, aside from winning.
Winning was great. There was a lot of fun stuff that happened in Rio, though. But I might get a little emotional here, but my coach, he's an Olympic hammer thrower.
Right.
He trained with Stuart Toger. I'm not sure if you know Stuart or remember Stuart.
I remember Stuart. Very, very well.
So Stuart can be argued as the greatest hammer coach in history, right? He's just a great coach. And we'd talk about Stuart Toger all the time. And my coach, Stuart, had his hands on Olympic medals like since the 60s and 70s. And that was a goal that my coach always, I still remember kind of sitting there receiving my medal on the podium, and my coach was in the stands, and he was kind of a little emotional there. And he told me after, like, I've always wanted to be part of a medal like this at the world stage. And it was so great. And what makes it even better is unfortunately, he passed away in August. And so all of that, like the win in Paris and the win in Rio, they meant so much more at his passing to me. We were a really, really good team, really good friends. We competed against each other since middle school.
Oh, wow.
And to have him pass and to know that we were able to get one more gold at the world stage for him. Like that was meaningful to me. I share my prize money with my coach, and it took him about a month to send me my prize money. And I was going to see him Sunday and bring him his portion of the prize money, and he died on Saturday. So just crazy timing. It's just a crazy thing, man. Like he got COVID, and his heart was just never
quite the same after that.
Yeah, he was up hiking in the mountains, going on a hunt with his son, his 14-year-old son, and he just ended up, from what they can tell, had a pretty bad heart attack on top of a mountain with no cell service around.
When you say coach, and everybody has a little different thought processes for it. When somebody says you're coach, what is a phrase or a word that comes to mind?
When they say you're a coach, is that what you said?
When they say, you know, you're coach, when you say, hey, give me something to describe your coach.
Oh, yeah. My coach had I think it's cool to work with an elite level coach and to realize we're working on, he had an innate ability to keep things simple as possible. We got to fine tune the most simple things in the throw to make it successful. And so, I mean, anyone that met him knew he was one of the kindest, most loving persons they've ever met. Like everyone, that's what they would always say. But to me as an athlete, working with him as a coach, I think a lot of athletes in high school and even the collegiate level and even higher elite levels would be shocked at how similar our practice was to something that you'd have at a junior high practice session, right? Like he was very, very good at making sure that we had the most simple way to work on the most beneficial things. So it was pretty cool.
That is what makes a coach unique, that they can make something complex, make it simple, and be able to translate it, and to be able to envision how the process goes through to make you successful.
Yeah, that was him to a T. That was him. I really think that was just from Toger, right? My guess is that was passed down to him from Stuart Toger. James was, he's like a multiple All-American. He had great things going for him. He's 3-time national champion in the hammer throw. And he just wanted to talk about orbit in the range of the path of the disc.
Right.
That was it. Our practice was, your orbit's off. Like he didn't care so much about footwork, about foot placement, about all this other stuff. He's like, when things go right, your orbit will grow. And when it grows, we're good. And so we've got to one of the best probably students of the sport in America and maybe in the world. And all he wanted to do was talk about orbit at practice. It was super simple, but he was very effective at it. It was really good.
Well, because the big thing is, as a coach, trying to translate it to the individual that you're trying to teach the skill to, and you try to implement it. If there's not that connection, it's never going to be successful, or as successful as it potentially could be.
Yeah, you're right.
You are listening to Just a Cup on Believe. If you've enjoyed the podcast so far, this episode, please subscribe. Put a like in the box, make a comment, and please share it with others. That's how we continue to grow. Remember, on Believe, it's every team, every topic. This is Believe. I'm Coach Brian Fetzer, and I have with me a Paralympic gold medalist, David Blair. And we are talking all things really track and field in life. And the one thing that really sticks out to me is the fact that when you say Olympics, when you say Paralympics, you say any kind of professional competition, 48 years old doesn't go, oh, that's how old somebody is. But in your case, I mean, you had some time away, and to me, your story is such a motivating factor, because I think about myself and being a little bit older, but not too much older. I couldn't see myself training every day to be at the highest level in the world, but you do that, and you are. What is the difference of training, that you're doing now that you might not have done before? And how do you keep your body intact?
It's great. That's a great question. And just from like the way I trained in 2016 to the way I train today, it's very, very different. And it makes me wonder if we've not been overtraining ourselves all along. Like I go to these meets and I get mistaken all the time for a coach, like all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's terrible in the same manner.
It's just such a fast assumption. They're like, oh, he must coach.
Mm-hmm.
So the good, funny story, I was at National Champs this last weekend, and I pulled up to the weigh station and got out, and I took my daughter on the trip with me, my youngest daughter. She's 16-year-old, and it's funny, my youngest daughter's 16, right? But
I love it. That's great.
I don't fault them for thinking this. I probably would do the same thing, but everywhere I go. So I got out of the car, and they're like, "Are you here to weigh in implements for your daughter? Are you here to, or when does she throw, or when does she compete?" And I'm like, "I'm the athlete here, man. Like,
that's awesome.
I'm here for myself." And so would we go on these events with Team USA? I'm older than like probably 80% of the staff. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Coaches, trainers, everyone.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm almost 50, man.
I love it.
The way I train now is so different from how I did before. I used to try and train with numbers, and this, I can accredit this to my coach that's passed, is you have to listen to your body, and that's it. And
Amen.
If you notice something is sore, like, you don't plow through it, you get it fixed. If you notice something is tight or something is tender, like, you can't, especially at my age, and I don't know, maybe I'm older than you, but the rule is, like, you get resolved what the issue is, you listen to your body. The biggest thing that my coach told me that helped the most in the last couple of years is, he's just like, "Look, man, like, you probably only need to lift 2 days a week, and anything on top of that is maybe bonus, but you need to listen to your body and how it recovers." So,
OMS, a great strength training friend of mine said, you get OMS, old man strength, and it kind of sticks with you. And if you just maintain it, it's not going to go away. And I've always thought that was an interesting way to do it. And I believe in it.
I'll tell you what, like, I'm stronger now, like, in the weight room than I've ever been at any time in my life. And I lift less than 30 minutes a week. Like, with the training that I've done, I found, I don't know if you've heard of Dan John. He's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine. He's a local Utah resident here, but he's well known. He teaches in, I think it's Cambridge. He's gonna make fun of me that I got that wrong, but he's written a lot of books on strength. He's a strength and fitness influencer before that was a thing. Right? He writes for Muscle Mag, and he has this book that I was reading, and he's talked to me about it before. He's like, you can get stronger than you've ever gotten in a simple way. And so finally, I'll tell you a funny story. I put him to the test, because in the mountains, the way we train, or the way I train, is when it's wintertime, you get strong, and then you let that strength just kind of maintain throughout the season in the spring. So when it starts to get cold, I start to trying to get stronger, and then maintain strength over the summer. And so what happened was, Dan had been like telling me about some different workouts to try, and finally I tried one that just stuck, and it felt great. And it was just, you're not going to believe this, but I do 9 reps.
Okay.
So let's say so it's really simple: push, pull. So like push for the bench, whatever. I don't bench. He talked me out of benching. I quit benching this year for the first time ever.
Really?
And so my push is an overhead press.
Okay.
And then my pull is like pull-ups. And I'm a big guy, right? But I can pull myself up. I weigh around 285, 290, and I can do pull-ups and chin-ups. And then I'll do a hinge, which is like, I do deadlift because my knees don't like squat anymore. Same thing. Front squats were always part of my workout routine, but my body started saying this isn't working, and I just dropped them. But yeah, that old man strength. So I did this simple 3 reps of whatever felt light on my overhead press, 3 reps of whatever felt like challenging, but I could still move it. So that the rule is you move it.
The velocity of the bar still moving in a quick rate as opposed to nice and slow.
You got it. Yeah, it's
Right.
not like hard struggle strain.
Right.
My shoulders always did bad under the bench. He's like, quit doing the bench. You don't need it. And that's total counter to anything.
Right.
So I did overhead press, I do pull-ups, and I do deadlifts, and that's my workout. And like the overhead press is like, I'll do 3 reps and then I rest for a hard minute, right? I set a timer. As soon as I set the bar down, I rest for a minute. When it goes off, I go do 3 reps again, and I do that 3 times. So I have 9 total reps, and like anybody can recover from 9 reps.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk recovery then, because right before we got on, you showed what was behind me, and if you're listening and not watching, you got to talk about this sauna, because I think recovery is the one aspect that I learned more as a coach later on in my career, that you have to let your athletes recover. And there's so many different modalities, so many different options, so many different ways to do it. It's finding out what fits best for you. And you were telling me about how you built a sauna in your house. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. So I got injured pretty bad in Dubai on a world championships. And I'd been listening to Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and she'd been talking about saunas. And you know, when you get injured, the first thing they say is, well, put ice on it, right? Don't put heat on it. So I was really nervous. Yeah, I was nervous, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get in the sauna. We were at this great gym. I got in that sauna. It was 200 degrees, and my back felt amazing. I couldn't walk anymore. I was at World Champs. I had to compete in less than 48 hours, and I'd hurt my back in a warm-up set of hang cleans. And I got in there. All of a sudden, I felt great. And like 3 minutes after getting out, it just froze. I couldn't walk again. So I thought, well, like that was promising, right? It did something. Right. So I went twice a day. And the day I competed, I went twice a day. No, I went 3 times a day. They just put me on a bus, and I'd just like hold on to the seat in front of me because I couldn't sit down because it hurt too much. And I'd just like ride the bus standing there like frozen like a board. And then the morning of the competition, I woke up and I couldn't walk, but I shimmied to the bus, got on the bus, went to the sauna, and it was better again. But this time it didn't come back. All that inflammation, it didn't come back. And so I competed that night, like less than 48 hours after a really bad back injury. I'd gotten cleared by the team docs, you know, they'll just go off your field. And I was like, okay, if that can get me in like, I got a silver medal at that meet. If that can,
which is crazy.
Yeah. So here's the plan. I was like, okay, I didn't fly all the way out here to not throw, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And so like if I get in the ring and throw a meter, I'm going to get in the ring and throw a meter. Like, I don't care. I'm going to compete. I'm not going to show up and just not compete. That's not me. And so the plan was no warm-up throws because you might hurt your back. And so I warmed up differently by like getting my body warm and moving around. And then I'd get in the ring and just go through the motions and kind of see how it felt. And even if it hurt, I was still going to go for it. So I did my first throw that was the plan. I was going to throw 1 throw and it should be good enough, hopefully, to get me a medal, and then I'll be done. Well, I'll see how it feels.
Right.
And I was fine. Like I did the 1 throw, like expecting to have a lot of pain, and there wasn't. And so I finished the competition, and said, you know what? You need one of these in your home. Like if it can do that for you at a competition, like you've got to have it. So yeah, I get in there almost every night. It's around 200 degrees. And like there's no soreness or no pain that I've not flushed with the sauna ever. Like it's just, if someone doesn't have it as part of their routine, I would really recommend they add it to their, you mentioned like it took you a little later into coaching before you realized how important the recovery was. Right. I've gotten to the point where I feel like there's no training without the recovery. Like the recovery is where the benefits come, not the training.
It's the healing process. And it's interesting. I've seen over the years I think my first time I went to an international competition, and some of the individuals from the US were the only ones that asked for ice. Everybody else wanted heat. They wanted sauna. They wanted those kind of things. And I found that very, very odd, because it's not something that I had been ever introduced to. But then the more you think about research, and then even just to think about the common sense part of it, is you want blood flow. You want things to open up so you can be more mobile, as opposed to, contracting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and maybe that doesn't sound very, physiologically sound, but it makes tons of common sense.
Yeah.
And
it
sometimes
does.
that is is a little bit better than
Here's what's crazy is most of these universities, they all have a sauna, and most of the time they're all empty.
Correct.
And I feel like the slightest bit of tension, I feel like the slightest bit of soreness, it's gone. Like, I'm like, oh, you got to go in the sauna to clear that out. And you're right. You're dead right. Like, we have this mentality sometimes of like thinking, well, we know how to do things. We know how to do them right. And so they always say to ice it. Like, can you imagine? I had all of the med staff, right, of Worlds.
Yeah.
And I'm like telling them, I'm going to go get in the sauna. And they're like, because I have this inflamed back, right? They wanted to give me cortisone shots. They wanted to do a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
I called up my coach. He's like, he's a chiropractor, by the way. And he's like, no, we gotta stretch it out a little. And I was like, well, I'm going to get in the sauna. And they're like, well, sometimes, even my coach, he's like, sometimes heat is not good for these. It can inflame it. I'm like, I'm going to trust the stuff I've read from Dr. Patrick.
Yeah.
Dude, I freaking got in the sauna, heated up my whole body, and I felt like an immediately, yeah. So, yeah, these people, I would say that it's, and the data is there saying that, like, well, you can lift and then sauna, and it doesn't hamper your muscle recovery. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't impair it in any way, whereas the ice baths can.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
How many times a week do you work out? I mean, at your age right now, when you say, you lifting is about 30 minutes a week, but how many times do you throw? How many times do you do those kind of training exercises?
Yeah. I'll throw 3 times a week typically, and lift 2 to 3 times a week. That was the game. Like, I used to lift 4 times a week and throw 4 times a week, and I can't do that anymore. And so, like you said earlier, that old man, like, it doesn't go away. So, funny story with this, doing the reps thing, those 3 reps, pause, 1 minute, and then 3 reps, then 1 minute pause, then 3 minutes, or then 3 reps. I was like getting nervous because it's wintertime, right? Winter's over. It was in January. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to test my bench. I haven't benched since July. I'm going to test it and see if I'm, like, I was nervous that I was getting weaker, right? And that I just burned my whole winter training session by doing this harebrained idea that was really easy for me to do. And I threw up more weight than I've ever thrown up in my life on the bench, and I hadn't benched since July. And so that was it. I sent him a text, and he's like, I got to send him an email still. He's like, you got to document this for me. But I'm telling you, like, I'm convinced, like, we're overtraining, and we're overtraining a lot of our athletes.
Oh, that is something that I 100% agree. I would venture to say I overtrained athletes way more than I trained them correctly, because it's that stigma in your mind. You got to do more. That's just the United States, like, just thought process. Everything is do more. If you're gonna have if you're gonna have 1 burger, have 2 burgers. Like, if you're gonna have this, you got to get more of it. And when you think that it's about the recovery process, that's the reason why people take drugs. It's not to get stronger; it's to recover so you can work out again. And I think that's also something that's a whole different subject and topic. But that's the reason why those things happen. It's all about recovery. It's all about being able to come back at a high level.
I go to these college meets and I talk with these throwers, and they're like, yeah, I'm injured here, or I have a bad groin, or I have a bad this, or I have a bad that. And I'm like, dude, you're not even 21. What do you mean? How do you have this? Or I saw athletes at the Olympic Training Center go out with injuries that needed surgery to correct. And no surprise. How did you hurt it? Well, I was doing bench. Why do you need to bench 415 pounds? Why do you need to be under that weight? Like, how is
Right.
415 pounds going to help you? Do you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
I mean, yeah, I don't know if you've seen Ronnie Coleman, the former power lifter. I mean, he can barely move, but
I've
he
seen
was
it.
always lifting, these enormous amounts of weights, which, I mean, hey, his physique was amazing. I mean, he was at the pinnacle of what he
Yep.
was,
Yep.
but that made a toll for him now. I mean,
He crawls on stage.
yeah,
If he has to
it's
go on a
crazy.
pier to make he has to crawl to do it. Like, I've totally changed my mind. My mindset was always get as strong as you can and then get stronger. And now my
Mhm.
mindset now is like, how strong do you need to be to accomplish what you need to do? And once you get to that strength level, what are you trying to accomplish by going more than that? Like,
It's the law of diminishing returns, right? You
exactly,
know,
exactly. Yeah.
so I mean,
More is
you've
not
got
better.
and more is definitely not better. You've got some other passions that we were talking about before, broadcasting.
Yeah.
Doing track meets and doing other things. Like, I mean, how did that kind of come about for you to get into the aspects of broadcasting?
Just I just have a lot of personal interests that I pursue all the time. Other ones that like I can't even talk about them. Like, so you've met with and done a lot of athletes. They all have ADD. The ones that are like elite, they
Absolutely.
have they have to be able
Right.
to hyper focus on something. And I hyper
Sure.
focus on tons of things all the time. And then I'm an engineer. I have an engineer's mind. And so yeah, it just during COVID, it became pretty popular, right, to do a lot of things remotely.
Sure.
And I kind of took over. I got assigned to do something like that, and they're like, we can't figure out how to broadcast this. Can you figure it out? And you know, I'm like, well, yeah, if I'm interested in it, like, you probably won't see me for 3 or 4 months, right? Just dive in and go. And that's kind of I love that aspect of ADD. It's so cool to be able to just like dive in and get to know everything you can about a topic. And you're successful athletes, they'll do it on their sport, and they can't
Sure.
shut up about it because that's their mindset. Like, in the past we always called it they're passionate or they obsess over it. And like, well, this obsession is a gift, and it can be a detriment as well. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And then I just thought it was cool. I thought it's really fun. I hope to do some, honestly, when I'm done with the sport. Like, it would be fun to be able to see if I could get in and do some commentating on events and at a little higher level.
Oh, I mean, I think getting an inside view, getting a point of view from somebody that's actually done it and been there and done that, I think is such a crucial part of any kind of broadcasting, because you can give an inside kind of view. I think of Tony Romo with football, how he gives commentary from a quarterback, and he doesn't try to dummy it down. He
Yeah,
talks as if you were in an NFL, locker room or a
yeah,
meeting room, and he talks. I think that's such a unique point of view that a lot of broadcasters, they try to make it for the person that doesn't understand, and that's typically not who's watching. It's
yep,
typically the fan that has been a track athlete or been a volleyball player, been whatever sport it
yeah,
might be, and so you're trying not to you're trying to appeal to a different audience when you should be appealing to you
yeah.
know
I
who's
agree.
the actual fan.
I agree. I've noticed that with him too. You're right. Like, yeah,
It's amazing. I mean, I watch him with my wife. My wife's like, I don't understand what he's saying. Well, like, you're not a football person. Like, you don't understand the sport as well. And she's actually probably got to know it a little bit better because you know
because of that stuff.
he's
Yeah,
because he's so high level on things.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
I agree.
Well, so what's next? When's the next competition? I mean, the Olympic, the Paralympic trials coming up,
Yeah.
and
So
what's the next step?
weird year for us because of COVID. They canceled a world championship that we were supposed to have in Kobe, Japan, the year after Tokyo.
Right.
And when that happens, the host cities buy the rights to host the event, right?
Hmm.
And so they've combined this year to kind of make that up, and we actually have a world championship and the Olympics in the same year for us. So yeah, I usually don't start throwing until towards the end of March because our season goes till, the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a national championship this last weekend out in California to qualify for a world championship team in May in Kobe, Japan. And so that's my next big meet is towards the end of May in Kobe for world championships. And then right after that is Olympic trials or Paralympic trials. And then once that's done, then you get to settle down for the season as far as travel wise goes and hyper focus on your technique and your training.
Where are the Paralympic trials located?
Okay, so they have not announced it yet, but it's Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'll be coming out to Florida this year. And so I'm looking forward to that. I came to Florida during COVID to go to Disney World with my family.
So it'll be in Orlando?
They don't have a host city yet that I know of. It could be I missed an email, but
I need to try to find that out because I'd love to go out and watch that competition since I live down in Florida.
Yeah. Apparently they said it's very likely we're going to Florida for Paralympic trials, team trials. So I'm excited to come back to that state. It's a great state.
Oh, big in the track and field, big in the sports period.
Yeah, I love it. I really do like it a lot.
Well, David, I appreciate so much taking time and giving some insight into your life, into the sport and Paralympics. Such an encouragement. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm beyond encouraged as a 50-year-old man, knowing what you go out and do and compete. It's so encouraging.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been eye-opening. It's been really nice. I think I don't know if hack is the right word, hacking, but I definitely don't train the way that everyone thinks I should be training. And as a result of that, I'm stronger than I've ever been. And I shouldn't say that out loud, right? But I hardly ever have any muscle pain or muscle problems, right?
It's a good thing.
If you think there's a chance you're overtraining, I guarantee you're overtraining.
I would agree. I would 100% agree on that one.
Yeah.
100%.
Whatever your sport, if it's pickleball, I know that's really popular. I love pickleball. I'm excited to play some pickleball when I'm done here. I play it a lot with people in the neighborhood. Anything you're doing, you got to pay attention to that body. If something tenses up on you, back off, get it fixed, and then go at it some more. Go get in a sauna. It'll probably fix it for you.
Absolutely. Wait, thank you for joining Just a Cup on Believe with myself, Brian Fetzer, and our guest, David Blair. You can get this podcast on Believe.com or Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It helps us greatly. Have a great one. Be blessed, my friends.